Hello. So today we are going to talk about domain and range. The previous days we have been talking about functions, specifically what is a relation, how do we determine when a relation is a function or not. And we looked at a couple different examples. We had some coordinate points that were in a set, some tables, a mapping diagram, and then we even did that vertical line test. So in this here, we're going to use those similar examples, but now we're going to determine the domain and range. And let's define what domain and what range is. So domain is the set of all x values and then our range is a set of all y values. So domain is your x's, range is your y's. So let's look at a couple examples and we'll practice this concept of determining domain and range from different types of functions. So let's have these coordinate sets here. So 0, 1, -1, 2, and then 2, 2. So there's our set. Now, when we are determining our domain and range, we have a couple things that we actually want to do first. So when you're listing out your domain and range, you want to list in order from smallest to largest. And then we do not want to repeat values. So don't repeat values. So using this example, first let's determine if it's a function or not. So when you're looking at coordinate points, determining if it's a function, you just have to look at your x's. So I've got 0, -1, and 2 there. So because none of those are the same, yes, it's going to be a function. So that's the first question we want to ask. Even if it's not a function, we can still determine domain and range. So domain, I want to look at my x values. So I've got 0, -1, and 2 here. List them in order from smallest to largest. So my domain is -1, 0, and 2. My range is all of your y values. So I've got 1, 2, and 2. And then here we don't want to repeat any of our values, and I still want to do it from smallest to largest. So my range is 1, 2. Pretty straightforward. For example 2, let's make ourselves a table. So I've got x and f of x here. Make that straight. 8, -2, -3, 1, 2, 2, -3, 0. Now, when you see f of x or g of x or h of x, any letter of x with parentheses there, this is just another way of saying y. So this is an xy table. Just with functions, we use f of x, g of x, h of x. We use these different notations because if you used y all the time, you could get confused of which function you're referring to. So here we've got f of x. Now for function or not, determining yes or no, Notice here my x's, I've got this -3 and then -3. So because I've got the same x value repeated there, it's a no. It's not a function. The x value repeats itself. But even though it's not a function, I can still determine what my domain and what my range are. My domain are all of my x values here. And remember, we don't want to repeat anything. We want to list it from least to greatest. So my domain is -3, 2, 8. And then our range is all of our y values, or f of x in this case. And again, list from lowest to highest, smallest to largest, -2, 0, 1, 2. Third example, we're going to do a mapping diagram. So that's when we have the circles there. So I've got -5, 10, and 15. Let's see. Ooh. Maybe I can make a better circle. Yeah, there we go. And then 0 and 2. So here's my other circle there. So I'm going to draw an arrow from -5 to 0. I'll do one from 10 to 0 as well. And then from 15 to 2. Now, for function, if it's a function, yes or no, notice that all of my values on the left here, which are my inputs, none of those are repeating, right? Like 5 goes to 0, -5 goes to 0, 10 goes to 0, and 15 goes to 2. So because none of those are repeating, it is considered a function here. So that function question, yes or no, it is a yes. So my domain is listing out my inputs, my x values. So -5, 10, 15. And my range is my outputs, or my y's, which here is 0, 2. Now this one's nice because it already had it in order for us. This last example here, example number 4, this graph, one important note to make first, if you have closed dots, remember this from summer school, those are going to result with the brackets. So you'd have to have a bracket on the end of it. And then for an open circle, that's when you use the parentheses. So we'll look at that example here. Now, function yes or no, you draw the vertical lines here and notice that it's not touching more than once. So this is a function. We say yes there. Now, for determining domain and range, it's not that you're going to list all of your values. Think of it as if you were to represent one of those inequalities. So you use the parentheses and you say what's like your farthest left point to your right point. So for my domain, I'm going left to right because it's all my x values. So what's my left point to my farthest right point here? So my farthest left point is -4, and my farthest right point is 6. And this had a closed dot, so that is a bracket. And then here I had an open circle, so it's a parenthesis. So my domain is bracket -4, 6, parenthesis. And then range, instead of going left to right, you're going lowest to highest, or down to up. So we're going from, I'll erase those lines there. We're going from our lowest here at -3 to our highest up at 2. I'm reading all of my y values here. So we go -3 to 2, and -3 was a closed dot, so that's a bracket, and 2 is a parenthesis because it's an open circle. We will investigate the domain and graphs more in a later video, but for now, this is a good introduction of how are you reading domain and range, and then more specifically towards everything. So the big takeaway, your domain is all of your x values, and your range is all of your y values. And remember the important notes here of list it from smallest to largest, and then don't repeat any values. So copy this down into your notebooks, and we'll be using this the next day in class.